All right, welcome everybody. This is our Fireside Chat, where we're going to be talking about migrating and modernizing SQL Server workloads on AWS. Today, I'm joined by Adnan Ijaz. You want to introduce yourself, Adnan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Adnan Ijaz. I'm the Director of Product Management in Commercial Software Services Group here at AWS. I've been with the group for over 6 years, and I've seen customers over the past 6 years migrate and modernize their SQL Server workloads with AWS.
And I'm Sean Lewis. I lead our Microsoft Workloads go-to-market team, working closely with Adnan's team and, of course, with our customers to help them migrate, optimize, and modernize their Microsoft-based workloads with AWS. So, Adnan, if we think about some of the challenges that customers are facing, maybe just kind of tee us up here. What are some of those big SQL Server-related issues or challenges that you see customers dealing with?
Yeah. So, Sean, I would say, as I said in the intro, I've been here for 6 years, for the past 6 years. So I've seen that transition. So early on, back in 2016, we had started to see a lot of migrations of SQL Server workloads to the cloud started to happen. The idea or the intent at the point was mostly around, hey, be able to, it's the agility with the cloud, scale up, performance, and we've seen that trend accelerate. A lot of large enterprises are moving their mission critical databases workloads to the cloud and running in the reliable and most performant manner. But, over the past few years, we have also started to see a broad trend around move to managed, services trend where, if you do not have a reason to do any undifferentiated heavy lifting, use a managed services like Amazon RDS to manage your SQL Server. And more recently, we've started to see a broad trend around modernization. Like if you were to really build a newer application in the cloud or extend the application to take the full agility of the cloud, how would you go about modernizing your architecture, breaking monolith to microservices? So there, in all of that, the challenges have varied. It started from, hey, how do I easily migrate? A lot of that is a very proven model. A lot of customers do it at scale, but now it's shifting from lift and shift to the cloud to now modernization. So, it varies. The challenges varies based on what is it that customer is trying to do at what cycle.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting evolving process, right? We've seen customers move up the stack, get rid of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, evaluate managed offerings, evaluate modernization where they may have other cloud-based database engines that they'd like to take advantage of. So Adnan, another concern that we've heard from customers as they evaluate their SQL Server options, a lot of feedback around this Microsoft end of support date for SQL Server 2012, just passed on July 12th here.
Exactly.
A lot of customers are asking questions, figuring out what their plan is. What is the plan with AWS? What are we hearing?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty compelling event for customers to think about their existing SQL Server 2012 deployments and what to do with those with now the past end of support event. Customers who choose AWS have a variety of options to pick from. First and foremost, you can look at the database. Not all SQL Server deployments are hard to upgrade. You can actually go through the upgrade cycle, and AWS provides through AWS Systems Manager automation and runbooks that you can use to test and really upgrade your deployments easy. That's one path. For some cases where it may be more involved, you may have dependencies. Your deployment may have dependencies on the underlying operating system and whatnot. So we offer a program called End of Support Migration. That is the program that helps you decouple your application from the underlying operating system. And really, you can do away with this whole end of support event for forever by decoupling your application from the underlying operating system and run a newer version. And then the third one is it's also an opportunity for you to see what to do with these, workloads. Yes, you can actually get extended support, but at some point you just delaying the inevitable. You have to actually think about what do you do with these workloads. So modernizing some of these workloads is also a great option. So really, depending on what your because no one size fits all, depending on what is the stage of the workload that you're talking about, how to think about that. You have a variety of options to pick from. But it is an important kind of milestone in the SQL Server 2012 journey that it's which is prompting a lot of our customers to think about how to manage their these deployments going forward.
Definitely. And then another piece, just to cap off here, we hear a lot of customer feedback around licensing with SQL Server. So, what are our customers' options around their existing licenses and how they can run those in AWS? Getting SQL Server from AWS direct, how does that work?
Yeah, so customers have the options to purchase licenses directly from us. Here, we call it license included offering. They can get it from to run with Amazon EC2. They can with the self-managed deployments, or they can actually also get it with the Amazon RDS for SQL Server, which is a managed offering for running SQL Server deployments. They just come in and use the offerings and licenses that AWS provides, and you pay as you go, follow pay as you go model. For customers who already have existing licenses that they want to bring to the cloud, they can bring their qualifying licenses to Amazon EC2. And then in the BYOL model, and actually, they can run it on the shared infrastructure if the licenses follow. So if the licenses have software assurance as part of the license mobility, but if they don't have software assurance, they can still run those licenses on dedicated hosts. Granted, those licenses were required before 1st of October 2019, or they were part of a true up for an active enterprise enrollment. That was active before 1st of October 2019. So if you have that, those kind of licenses, you can even run those on dedicated hosts. But if you have a license with active software assurance, you don't have to worry about that. You can actually bring it to Amazon EC2 and run it on shared EC2 instances and don't have to worry about other things. So you can leverage your existing SQL Server investments in EC2.
Yeah, I think it's important for customers to understand that there's an and there, right? There's a lot of flexibility with these different paths, and depending on the workload and the requirements of the workload, you can either take advantage of those existing licenses that you already have and bring them into AWS, and maybe spin up a new workload or a workload that's spikier, right? It's important to remember these products, SQL Server Enterprise, it can be very expensive.
Yeah.
So rather than procuring that license, pay for it by the hour, pay for it when you need it, spin it up, spin it back down as part of the agility of the cloud, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you use only for what you want and what you have to, and not pay for the, on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. So let's kind of frame up why customers would be interested in running SQL Server on AWS, right? So I would love for you to put yourself in the customer's shoes and kind of think about that for us. Like, what are the key tenets around why a customer would want to do that?
Yeah. I mean, the motto for our team is to, continue to make AWS the best place to run SQL Server workloads. And really, when I think about AWS being the best place to run SQL Server workloads, I really think about at three different layers. At the most basic level, you have infrastructure. You have your compute, you have your storage, you have your networking. And you need to make sure that customers had the broadest and deepest selection of offerings in the space. Yeah. One thing that really differentiates AWS from some of the other competitors who also enable customers to run SQL Server in the cloud is really our AWS Nitro system, which is a new platform that we use to build EC2 instances in which we have really built a system that a lot of management activity related to the hypervisor, for instance, network management, storage management, has been offloaded to, dedicated hardware. So that means that the system is more secure and more performant. And that really has allowed us to really iterate quickly on the compute instances. We have over 475 plus instance types, for virtually any kind of workload that you want to run in the cloud. You're able to come here and pick one of the instances that meets your need. Same for storage. Like, for instance, we had the, EBA block storage, object storage with S3, but a lot of SQL Server deployments, especially highly available deployments, required Windows file server. So we launched Amazon FSx for Windows file server, a few years ago. Then recently we added support for NetApp ONTAP, for customers who have used that kind of storage. So really, really broad selection of compute and storage offering for you. And really that is secure and performing. Then the second level, I would talk about capabilities like bringing your own licenses, using AWS License Manager, for instance, and you can bring your license today, but how do you account for those licenses? How do you track those with the peace of mind that you're not, you're able to track your license usage more accurately. And then at the third level, I would talk about things that are core experience of SQL Server. You need to be able to patch, you need to be able to take backup, you need to be able to deploy complex topologies like SQL Server always on.
Yep.
So how do we make it easier for customers to do those things? So we have investments in all three categories to make sure that customers really get a great integrated end-to-end experience. So put those things together is really why I believe AWS is the best place to run.
It's a very compelling story, right? We're talking about the pace of innovation, talking about the engineering investment that AWS puts in, and you talk about some of those capabilities like License Manager. I think it's important for customers to understand those are available at no cost for customers, right? This is capability that we build with AWS to help customers manage those entitlements, figure out where they can most efficiently deploy them. So they don't have to necessarily maybe buy licenses again. They've already got some on the shelf that they can reallocate.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you talked a little bit about price performance at the end of that. I would love to go a little bit deeper on there. So tell us a little bit more about why AWS is the best kind of price performance place to run these workloads.
Yeah, I mean, there's a common, I would say, misperception that, hey, hardware is commodity. So if you get an instance from one cloud provider, from another cloud provider, it's the same CPU, same, all specs being the same. It's just an instance, which is not accurate. Because of our investments in Nitro systems and really our emphasis on performance, the price performance angle to the compute offering really matters a lot. In fact, we have now seen multiple third-party benchmarks where third-party vendors have come in and really benchmarked, our instances, some of our compute offerings that are really optimized for SQL Server with some of our competitors, and they have seen up to 68% better price performance consistently. So really that angle matters. So it's just two instances in two different clouds having the same specification are not the same. So price performance matters at the end of the day. And really that is, we're really proud of the work that we have done in the core platform with the Nitro system and storage and everything to make sure that we continue to be, really on the cutting edge for our customers.
The numbers don't lie, right? And I think one of the things we hear a lot from our customers when my team is engaged on a proof of concept or some other engagement is, hey, let's go through and actually look at the data, right? Let's do the benchmarking, let's do the performance testing, and let's see what's going to be the best price performance for your workload. And as you said, AWS is a very strong story.
Yeah, we're not shy of any bake-off.
No, not at all.
Competition.
So then talk to me a little bit about optimization. And as customers are migrating these workloads into AWS, what are their options around right-sizing and optimizing? We talked about this with licensing a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that is actually a very important angle to this conversation. There are always this part that is thrown around, SQL Server running in AWS being expensive. And there's not really much truth to that. But a core part of what I'm really proud of that and how, we claim that we're customer obsessed. And I think our program that we call AWS Optimization and Licensing Assessment, OLA program, is really, it highlights the crux of what we mean by customer obsession. So when customers come in and they say, hey, I have these many licenses, I want to move to the cloud. I'm using this much SQL Server editions. In most cases, they're not running in an optimal manner. They have licenses they are not utilizing completely. They have licenses they're not even using at all. So this program, what it does, we partner closely with the customer and we really help them right size and optimize their environment. Are they using the right CPU? Are they using the right SQL Server edition? Are they using other, additional features that, whether they should be using or not? And the result is that we actually help them right-size their environment. Let's take Parsons, for example. They came to us, we worked with them. We looked at their SQL Server usage. We evaluated that using the OLA program that I mentioned. And we realized that we helped them realize that there were a number of things that they were not using efficiently. They downgraded a number of, editions based on their capabilities and all of that. And ultimately, they save up to 35% in operational cost. And that is a big win. Like you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is to really partner with us and see how you're using your SQL Server real estate and really help you optimize that. So that is something that we're really proud of because, just like work with us and we'll show you how you can reduce your spend with AWS.
Absolutely.
So no less.
And it's a great program for customers that may not have a good handle on what even their on-premises environment really looks like, right?
Yeah.
So allow us to come in, do that assessment with you. You own the data as the customer. You can do whatever you wish with it. We would love to dive into it further with you and figure out how we can help you accelerate your migrations that might already be in progress, but just as importantly, optimize what you've already got in AWS, right? And make sure that you're taking advantage of the resources you've already procured. Let's talk about some of the pathways as customers are moving SQL Server into AWS, because there's a few of these, and each one could be more of an and, like we talked about before, right? As we see customers using multiples to get their workloads into the cloud. So maybe you could tee up the three paths first.
I can do that, and I think we plan to go deep into that, so we can cover that. So I would say the first and I would say the easiest is just lift and shift. Take a deployment that you have on premises, bring it to the cloud, rehost it, pick one of the 475 plus instances I mentioned that matches your need, and really start deploy that. The benefit there is it's the fastest way for you. If you have any data center lease event coming, and you really for whatever reason you have to just get in the cloud, that's probably very reliable, easier way to do that. Second one is if you're really more like, hey, I don't want to deal with the undifferentiated heavy lifting of, say, managing the database and workloads, so then Amazon RDS is really a great option for you to put that undifferentiated heavy lifting on AWS as part of managed services. And the third one is really, which is getting more popular recently, is the whole modernization. You can actually pick one of the multiple purpose-built databases that we have to really match the needs of whatever that you want to do. It's a use case specific.
Got it. Let's dive into each of those a little bit deeper, and we can talk about some customer examples.
Sure.
So let's say I've got a data center lease that's coming up at the end of the year, or I've got a compelling event where I want to sell my data center. And I really want to figure out, hey, I've got these SQL workloads that are existing on premises today. Where should I start there?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, it's really, I think the easiest and fastest way is you just lift and shift, rehost your workloads in EC2. The benefit of that, as I mentioned earlier, it's the fastest way to do it. It's also, you have the ability to choose from license included offering that AWS provides. You can buy licenses from us and pay as you go, or you can bring your own licenses. And I outlined, some of the requirements around BY or earlier in one of your questions, but you really can bring your existing licenses and use on EC2. And really, once you are here, then you can start thinking about, okay, if this is really how you're going to continue to run, fine. But, if you're like, okay, now I am here, I have, for instance, I have now shut down my data center. Now that is where you can start thinking about the next steps.
Yeah, I think it's also important to understand the different paths that customers have around migrating their databases. Can you talk to us a little about database migration service or the schema conversion tool at all?
Yeah, so a lot of, in when you move from the rehost to some other things, like for instance, you want to move to managed services, or you want to actually modernize your SQL Server, move away from SQL Server to some other purpose-built databases. Tools like AWS Database Migration Services and Schema Conversion tools can be really helpful because they can help you ease your migration from one path to another. In most cases, you don't even have to going from rehosting, you can just take one of your existing SQL Server migration methods and bring it to the cloud. Same goes for moving to the managed, offering like RDS. It is something that you don't have to go through the full-on migration. You can go through a replatforming exercise and determine how you run in AWS. The third one, which is really more modernization, and we'll get to that shortly, is really where you need tooling like database migration service and schema conversion tool to really help you go from one database engine to another one.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for the pathway, right? Like you've got these different paths. You've got options that you can use in different places, whether you're in the rehosting phase all the way up to modernization. Again, AWS has built these tools and built them with a two-way door design philosophy, right? Where customers can move into AWS, they could move the workload back on premises if they really wanted to. They could actually convert the database engine into multiple engines, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So these tools are useful in multiple phases of the journey. Let's talk a little bit about that managed services option. So we have the relational database service, RDS. A lot of times when customers ask about that, they've heard about Aurora. They've heard about our cloud native database engine through Aurora, Postgres, and MySQL. But they're managed RDS offerings for SQL Server, Oracle, some of these other commercial databases as well. So tell us a little bit about RDS SQL Server.
Yeah, I mean, think of this as we talked about the rehost. It's a self-managed offering. You fully control it, but that also means that all these tasks such as scaling events, patching, backup, all those responsibilities are with you and your DBAs. If you feel like, hey, if there is no particular reason for you to own and have full control on that deployment, a better option is you can run it in RDS and because it's a managed service, you actually, all these tasks that are, frankly, as we have said multiple times, it's undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's something that you have to do, but doesn't really add value to your business. And if there's no reason for you to own that and do it by yourself, you can let RDS do that. So that is really the managed angle come in. But then, if you think about Amazon Aurora, which is our managed database service, it's Postgres compatible, and it has support for other database engines as well. Think of this as an evolution of the next step. Like we started with the rehost, we managed databases, and the third one is it's fully managed. You're getting off of commercial licenses, so you are able to get the performance and scale of a commercial database at 1/10 of the cost. You start from really fully owning it, let Amazon manage it for you, but you still run SQL Server to a point where, hey, I don't even have to run SQL Server. I can get the same better performance and scale at 1/10 of the cost. So really the full spectrum of options.
Yeah, and getting rid of some of those core operational tasks that might be undifferentiated to a customer around managing and operating the database could be very valuable and impactful, not only from a great performance standpoint, right? Multi-availability zone. We'll talk about some of these highly available architectures a little bit later, but also reallocating time into areas that are a little bit more strategic to the business. And there's also some security benefits as well, right? I mean, we can remove some of the admin privileged access requirements for that database and then manage it on the customer's behalf.
And following best practices, you don't have to worry about all of that. That those managed services take care of that for you, whether you're on RDS or on Aurora, depending on what the use case is.
Absolutely. And then in terms of customer stories, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Kaplan and some of their work with RDS SQL Server.
Yeah, I mean, Kaplan is one of the customers who actually really using SQL Server with RDS and able to, take benefit of all the tasks that were really, the theme of this conversation is undifferentiated heavy lifting. Is really, I would repeat the word. It's what they used to do, like how do you back up, how do you patch? None of that they have to take care of that. So Kaplan is really all in on RDS, and you're leveraging that to run their SQL Server workloads.
Before we close out on the RDS piece with SQL Server, what is RDS Custom? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's actually very complementary and, in fact, unique offering. It's part of think of this part of RDS, but we have these two worlds. We are self-managed in EC2 and then fully managed RDS. Turns out that there are a number of use cases as we work backwards from customers. There are a number of use cases where customers really want the benefit of, I don't want to deal with backup, scaling and patching, but I really want to have some control of the environment because maybe I need to install additional software. It's the proprietary software, or there are some other reasons. Like, for instance, I need to install SharePoint. So to bring the best of both worlds, we create RDS Custom for SQL Server. So you get the automation benefits from the managed service like RDS, but you have control in the certain aspects of your deployment, so you can actually go configure it and change it based on your needs. So it's a fairly we launched it late last year for use cases like the one that I outlined, like installing additional software, and it actually goes on to show the remember what earlier on I talked about the customer obsession part, how you work backwards from customer. This is really a great example where we didn't try to fit the frames like you own it or there's a managed service does it. If there is a need for customers to do it, we can bring the best of both worlds and really bring it to customers. So far the response has been really positive.
Very positive response from customers, and I think a good example of how Amazon and AWS listen to our customers. Exactly. And our roadmap and what we build is based on customer feedback.
Yeah.
Right. So good job with that happy medium there. So let's move into more of the modernization pathway here. Mm-hmm. Right. So we've been kind of touching on this around the edges with components like Aurora. Tell me about what customers are thinking as we're talking to them about, hey, I've got SQL Server, maybe I've migrated it into AWS, or I've got some of these SQL Server workloads that are on-prem, but I don't know that SQL Server is the database engine that I want to stick with.
Sure.
Right? Tell us about some of the different modernization options.
Yeah, first, before I answer your question, I think it's important for me to iterate. We love SQL Server. We have, thousands of customers running their mission critical deployments in SQL Server, and they continue to expand. A lot of our customers continue to bring more deployments as they shut down more data centers, and we love it. They continue to grow. But then, back to your question, in certain cases, customers coming back and say, look, there is licensing cost. I want to reduce my licensing spend. Or there's agility concerns, like some of these workloads or applications were built before they came to the cloud. So they are thinking about refactoring, re-architecting some of these applications to really push on the scale and performance limits. And that is where the modernization options come in handy, whether you want to do it for cost reasons or whether you just you want to refactor it for agility. And then AWS provides a range of purpose-built databases like memory, in-memory, document, key value. So depending on what the use case for your application is or your workload is, you can choose one of these custom-built or purpose-built options, which is really targeted to extract maximum performance for that particular use case. So that is really where we're seeing a lot of interest in some of these modernization options where customers are saying, either help me reduce my licensing spend. I'm really done with some of these punitive licensing constraints that we have seen from the vendors, or really help me modernize these because I can get the most value out of the cloud. And that is where, remember you talked about the database migration service and schema conversion tool. That is where these tooling and products come in really handy. Because it's not like, hey, yes, you can modernize, but really outline the entire path, what you can do to really go from a commercial database to really a version that is more cloud native at 1/10 of the cost. So tooling like that really lays out the path for customers to go follow.
I think it's all about customer choice, right? I mean, we have database migration service, hundreds of thousands of databases migrated. Sometimes that's a customer moving into a commercial database engine on AWS. Sometimes it's an open source cloud native engine. It's a purpose-built decision for the customer, right? Workload by workload, figuring out what's going to best meet their needs and requirements.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
So Adnan, when we're talking about some of these different modernization options that our customers have, I would love to hear a specific customer example where we've worked with help a customer modernize, and what are some of these different choices that customers have in the cloud native engines?
Yeah. Happy to share. There are lots of these examples, and I think we continue to see a lot more traction. But before I do that, I realized that I did not explain Amazon Aurora for our audience. So for those who do not know, I think we talked about RDS and how it's different from the self-managed EC2. But very briefly, just to level set for those who don't know about it, Amazon Aurora is a fully managed MySQL and PostgreSQL compatible managed service here in AWS, which provides the performance and availability of commercial databases at really in a cost-effective manner. You have heard me talk about 1/10 of the cost, so that's really where it comes from. So yeah, let's talk about Expedia. And they moved off of SQL Server to run on Amazon Aurora with PostgreSQL. And there were a number of reasons why they wanted to do that. The data they used to process, it used to take over a day. But by moving from SQL Server to PostgreSQL with Aurora, they were able to bring it down to a few seconds. They avoided vendor lock-in, all these performance in general, reduce licensing cost. So they are really one of the great examples of how they took really mission critical workloads running on SQL Server to open source relational database engine. So they are a good example. There are quite a few other examples, and like I said, that interest continues to ramp up, especially how the licensing changes that we have heard, the punitive licensing issues that we continue to deal with. So that interest in open source relational database technologies, I think it's compounding every single day.
I completely agree. That's a great case study with Expedia. It's out there online for folks to look at, and would love to talk to other customers that want to see those same types of results.
Yeah.
Right? We'd love to dig in. And one of the questions that we get around that move is around some of the compatibility issues with SQL Server.
Yeah.
I've got a proprietary SQL-based app. There's a lot of stored procedures in there. Maybe I can lift and shift that, like you said earlier with the rehost, Adnan. But if I want to really break free and modernize here, what can AWS do to help those customers?
Yeah, it is a real problem where I have an application and it's not just that database logic is contained on the database side. Oftentimes that blends into the application source code. So while I can use products like schema conversion tool, database migration services to convert the schema to help with the migration, and those tools are fairly mature. We have seen a lot of large enterprises do that part of the migration very seamlessly. But what about when you have the SQL Server embedded in the application code? It's making the call. So we recently launched a product called Babelfish. It's a capability of Amazon Aurora Postgres. So the intent is that it's a layer that sits between your application and it understands T-SQL, which is the proprietary dialect of SQL Server, and all the communication protocols. So with minimal changes to your application, you can continue to leverage Aurora Postgres as your engine, database engine, while Babelfish helps really translates those commands that are coming from your application to the Postgres. So you do not have to really make wholesale changes to your application. So with the minimal changes, you can make it work. So we have quite a few customers who are been leveraging Babelfish to complete this migration, or should I say modernization, whereas previously they would have to think about refactoring or re-architecting the entire application. So now it's a good balance where you can leverage what you have without rewriting it, but then you continue to extend the newer part of your application with the open source technologies and databases.
Great capability for customers to go out there and try, right? Play around with their application, see what Babelfish can do.
I'm personally very excited about that. I mean, just the teams thinking around how can we help customers here? How can we innovate for them? And it's not an easy task, like taking something like this where our bar is to make it really keep it to minimal changes to the application. So thinking about how would we build this capability like this one, it's really, I think it's a great piece of innovation that we've been working on, and we're delighted to get it in our customers' hand.
Completely agree. So Adnan, I really appreciate the time today.
Yeah,
a lot of great info and just perspective from our engineering teams and what we're building for customers. And we talked about some great customer stories too. So as we think about some of these different paths, let's just quickly summarize.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the rehost path, right, where customers can migrate these SQL Server workloads into AWS, kind of lift and shift.
Mm-hmm.
The replatform path, where customers can leverage these managed services like RDS. And then we have the modernization path, where customers can take the commercial engine that they've got on premises in a different cloud, maybe even within AWS, and then move to a cloud.
You summed up the entire, let's say, 30 minutes of conversation in like 2 minutes. So yeah, absolutely. That's
awesome.
Great job,
all these different options are great for customers. We want to continue to be the best place for customers to run SQL Server, great price performance, great pace of innovation there. But then we've got options for customers that want to also optimize and modernize what they're doing with SQL Server in the cloud as well. All right, Adnan. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience here. I'm going to throw a few of these out to you, and then let's talk through them. Okay.
Let's do it.
So the first question is, what are my high availability options on Amazon RDS SQL Server? Are they the same as with EC2?
Yeah, so RDS offers a multi-AZ deployment option, which leverages database mirroring and always on availability groups for you to set up your HA topology, highly available topology with RDS. In EC2, you can configure it on your own. You have the access to the entire infrastructure instances, and you can do that. RDS makes it easier. Within a few clicks, you have a high availability topology that is ready to go. For database planned maintenance events, for instance, RDS will automatically switch over to your secondary node, so you don't have to worry about that. So really, you don't lose much by running your SQL Server always on topologies or HA topology for that matter with RDS, and it's spread into multi-AZ, so it provides naturally there's built-in improved availability mechanisms in that capability.
And it just works for customers, right?
Yeah. You don't have to worry about how you're going to set up the. You pick the AZs. With a few clicks, you have multi-AZ deployment ready to go. And it is, in EC2 we have products like Launch Wizard that you can use to configure that, but it still work for you to go configure it, even though those products make it easier. But that is the beauty of managed services. Like, we take on the work to do that, and you just press few clicks, and you have your primary and secondary set up in geographically separate locations and as part of multi-AZ. So,
but customer still gets to decide where the data lives from a sovereignty standpoint, which is a great capability of the availability zone. So, all right, our next question is: can I bring my own licenses to use for SQL Server deployment in EC2?
The short answer is yes. I covered it as part of the one of your earlier questions, so I'll keep it brief. The short answer is yes. You can purchase license from AWS. You can bring your own licenses as long as you have active software assurance with your SQL Server licenses. You can run it on any shared EC2 instances, and a lot of our customers follow that model where they can actually bring their existing SQL Server licenses and run in EC2 and to take advantage of the investments they have made licensing.
All right, great. All right, that's all the time we have for Q&A today. Adnan, really want to thank you for taking the time to join us. Great conversation and lots of good options for our customers here about their SQL Server journey into the cloud.
Yeah, glad to be here and glad to talk to our customers about the options that they have with running SQL Server in AWS. So it was great talking to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.